Ladies, gentlemen, boys, and girls, welcome to another episode of Metal Gear Mondays, the Games Club style podcast covering all things Metal Gear from left to right, top to bottom, inside and out in pseudo-historical recreational order. As sometimes I'm your host, Alessio Summerfield, and this week we have a very special guest, Ryan Kincaid, aka at Nitroid on Twitter, and probably more commonly known from the admin team over at Metal Gear Solid, the unofficial site. MGS TUS, for those of you playing at home. This interview is really fun. This was something that's been sort of cooking on the back burner for the last little bit. We've been kind of communicating over Twitter, and we've definitely plugged Nitroid on this show quite a few times, so I'm very excited to be able to present this. Sam and I did not have time to record a proper intro, just kind of due to logistics and personal timelines and stuff like that. This was recorded, I believe, the day before I moved from St. Louis, or maybe 2 days before, 3 days before. I cannot recall offhand. However, I'm recording an intro now, so yay. Ryan's fantastic. We talk a lot about his time with the unofficial site, a lot of discussion about the Metal Gear fandom and sort of goings-on from when everything was kind of in its prime. This is a really, really interesting interview, and a little bit of sort of like a part two to the fan discussion portion of our interview with Terry, for instance, when talking about the Kojima Code. This is sort of like a sequel to that, just kind of getting a different perspective on that fan community, as well as just sort of some insights into some of the stories and stuff like that from the very humble beginnings. So really cool interview, and interestingly enough, both Ryan Payton and Ryan Kincaid were in our thumbnail video for Ryan Payton's interview 2 weeks ago. So this is from Ryan to Ryan. Here we go. For all things Metal Gear Mondays, if you enjoy what you're listening to, you can go to MetalGearMondays.com or MetalGearSolidPodcast.com. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. For the most part, it's at Metal Gear Mondays. On Twitter, it's at Metal Gear Monday, just due to character limits. But all that is available on the website as well, Patreon, etc., etc. You can go to iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, leave a review. That would help us tremendously. And enjoy the episode, you guys. Consider sharing, and yeah, thank you. Mr. Ryan Kincaid, aka Nitroid, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's very nice to speak with you. I feel like we've plugged your Twitter account probably several dozen times on our podcast.
Yeah, I feel like the word count, like if you put everything we say on the podcast in like a word cloud, Nitroid is like one of the bigger words.
Yeah. I think per follower on Twitter, that's how many times we've plugged your Twitter account per our followers.
I'm sorry, and most of it's just pointless crap anyway.
But I wanted to ask Ryan, what's the what would be the thing if I was a Metal Gear fan from back in the day, and I guess if I was a like the unofficial site very savvy fella from back in the day, what can we tie you to that folks might be familiar with from them?
Well, I was an admin on the site with two other guys, so it was kind of a joint venture, and we were. We kind of handled all the administrative stuff, got the site working, functioning. There wasn't too much content we did ourselves. We kind of had everybody in the community contribute, and we sort of curated it. I did some machinima projects and some reporting on things. I went to E3 once to talk to Ryan Payton, and but mostly it was kind of everybody that was a part of that was contributing pretty equally. And it's funny that a lot of people remember MGS TUS for being as big as it was, because that was kind of riding off the back of another site that was maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here, but
no, go ahead, feel free.
When this fandom kind of got started on the internet, the first place that really kind of came together and was well known was a place called Metal Gear Net. And that's sort of where I came in, was just as a community member there, and got to know the webmaster, and like that site, if I remember right, launched in late 1997.
Whoa!
Before Metal Gear Solid actually launched in the US. So that's where kind of the grassroots things started, and there were Japanese communities, but I don't know too much about that side of things. But in the US, Metal Gear Net was kind of the place to go.
I feel like I have so many questions. Super, yeah. Like my mind's I'm like, oh my god, my mind's racing. But I wanted to ask before we get super far
Yeah.
because I think by the time this releases, our interview with Ryan Payton will more than likely be available publicly. And so I wanted to ask, what was it like talking to Ryan way back in the day?
He was as gracious as could be to a guy who basically just showed up on his doorstep asking a bunch of silly questions. I'm sure. I mean, okay, when I trying to remember the year this was because I was 21 and I went to E3 to basically cover Metal Gear Solid 4 and talk to him and hopefully get some time with Kojima. And um, yeah, he was awesome because we weren't some big gaming blog. We were just some little fan site. I mean, not in terms of Metal Gear stuff, we were at the top at the time, but in the larger scheme of things, we were kind of nobodies. But he was really cool. He gave me time to kind of do an interview. He invited me to come back and try out portable ops. Answered a lot of questions for me. Gave me some extra merchandise and told me how like if you want to meet Kojima, just hang around here and wait. He was really cool. I don't know if he remembers me at all, but yeah, he made an impression. He was a really good guy.
That's awesome. So literally nothing has changed, is what it sounds like. Because I feel like all of the things you said, you could just like put in the word Metal Gear Mondays, and it would like equal to our interview with him, which is great.
It was funny at the time because that site was so much fun to put together, but we were a bunch of jackasses. We
That also
we had
sounds
a
familiar.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it came down the grapevine, and if he's listening to this, maybe he can correct me later. But it came down the grapevine that one time we were referred to by the team there as the biggest group of Metal Gear fans that hated Metal Gear.
That's amazing. I love that. That's phenomenal.
And I don't know if that's true, but I like to think it is because that's about right. We complained about everything. So for him to kind of, open the door and be as gracious as he was really cool. But there was yeah, he was incredibly active back then and really this was a time when social media wasn't really big. So you had to kind of go to forums like ours to get news and to connect with other fans. And you couldn't just log on to Facebook or Twitter and find a Metal Gear community. People had to make them.
Right.
So he really made an attempt to kind of reach out to the fan communities, and no one else was really doing that at the time. So there was a bit. It wasn't much, but there was a bit of a back and forth then, akin to kind of what you see now with Twitter and companies having official Twitter accounts and community managers. So there was you could see like the early stages of that back then.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, and I know I've mentioned this on the show probably a couple times, but I feel like as sort of just like a lurker, the unofficial site probably in the early 2000s, maybe mid to early 2000s, was probably like it predated, as far as I'm concerned with me, it predated like me even looking at like GameSpot or IGN or Game FAQs. Like I feel like that was the first website that got me into checking on game news. So for me, this is weird that
That's
we
awesome.
get to talk to you. Yeah.
It was so much fun too. I mean, it helps when you're a fanatic about something. A lot of the major sites they'll cover topics and they'll touch on them briefly, but it's really the people who kind of live and breathe this stuff who have their ear to the ground and pick up this stuff on a more regular basis, if it kind of makes sense. Twitter has kind of changed that now, and Facebook, because everybody posts everything all the time. And so as soon as something breaks, you immediately hear of it. But at the time, unless you were really constantly listening to things and talking to other people, it was hard to kind of get more esoteric news on certain topics out of general gaming sites. So I think that was kind of the niche we filled.
So all of this stuff obviously starts at like a very specific place, and that is Metal Gear. So when did you discover the series?
Okay, so this is kind of funny. And I can tell you the romanticized version of this, or I can tell you what I think is the more real version of this. Which would you prefer?
Could we do
Give us
both?
both.
Okay. The romanticized version of this is as follows. So bear with me.
Sure.
Um, I was 4 years old. It was 1989, and my dad, who I didn't get to see very often at the time, brought me a gift one day and said, "Hey, I found this on the ground outside of where I worked, and I remembered you like this kind of stuff." And he handed me a copy of Metal Gear. And that was one of the few gifts I got from my dad at the time, so I latched onto it and kind of carried that forward. And that was Metal Gear on the NES. And then years later, I had a chance to try out the other version, and I played a translated version of Metal Gear 2 that was done by fans, and then Metal Gear Solid came out, and I got to try that. So I mean, I started back then. And that's kind of the romanticized version, is that it was just kind of it was fate that it was laying out by his car one day. But the more realistic take on that is, and years later I kind of went, wait a minute, that doesn't sound very realistic. Is that he probably just bought me a gift and was too embarrassed to say that. But yeah, I was a kid who was kind of reclusive and played games a lot, and my dad gave me a copy, and that was that.
Shout out to Ryan's dad.
That version of it too is almost it's kind of cute in its own way, though.
I like to think that there was some spirit out there who was like, "I'm going to put this game by his father's car,
and we will ruin his life right now."
Yeah, pretty much. That. Damn it.
and where would you go from there?
Probably an astronaut.
I love how all of our Metal Gear stories, I'm pretty sure all three of us, all of our Metal Gear stories are tied to our dads. So let's hear it for Metal Gear dads.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Metal Gear dads. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Metal Gear dads. Well, Kojima's Metal Gear story is oddly tied to some father figures too, it seems like. So so there you go.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that he kind of carries that into the stories as well. His experiences with fatherhood were partially what inspired those games.
For sure.
At least the later ones.
So you kind of talked about starting up this, like, the fan site and this whole I let me phrase this a different way. I was not there for the fan site thing. I was very much like, I would play Metal Gear Solid with my dad, and then I would like play Neopets or some shit like that. So what was it like being there for the infancy of the fan groups? And like, at the time, the internet was kind of bubbling all over the place with stuff like this. So
I mean, you didn't really think about it, but it was very much kind of like the Wild West at the time. And just to be clear, I didn't start the unofficial site, though I did end up as an administrator of it for a very long time. Okay. It was actually started by a fan out of Bulgaria, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his last name right. It's been a long time since I talked to him. It was Pavel Semyonov, I think was his name. But it was he and another guy named Ramesh and me, and we kind of managed the site together and made updates and did everything from there. But I mean, I guess when you're kind of in something, you don't really think about, oh wow, what's this like? Are we in the beginning of something big? It was just kind of like, hey, cool, we got a lot of people talking about Metal Gear, and it was just really cool to start sharing knowledge with people and figuring things out and how it all worked behind the scenes. And it all, every day kind of felt like an exploration. It was like cave diving. You didn't know what you were going to find.
What was the, I'm curious, because you said that there was obviously there was some sort of like fan site activity in 97.
Yeah.
What was the inciting incident? Like, was it some fan art? Was it like, what was the thing that broke that made somebody start a fan site that early?
I don't know if he wants me saying his name on stream. I probably should have asked him beforehand, but I've known him for a long time, the guy who ran that site. I don't know what actually prompted it, but he is a professional web developer now, and at the time he was just a big fan of the game, and Metal Gear Solid was coming out, and he said, I'm assuming one day he just kind of said, I'm going to make a website, and he did, and it was the best thing at the time. And he kept up with news meticulously. I mean, anything that came out about Metal Gear Solid, he covered. and his site and his forum ended up being like the primary hub for English speaking fans. It got to a point, and this is a true story, where one day in his website's chat room, someone popped into the chat and said, "Hey, this is David Hayter, the voice of Solid Snake. I just thought I'd drop in and say hi." And everybody, of course, made fun of him. They're like, "You're not David Hayter. Get out of here, dude. Who do you think you are?" And it turned out it was, because he later got a hold of my friend and said, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that this was actually me. I'll come back in again sometime."
Oh
but
my God.
but I got yelled at when I went in.
And that's where the reputation was born, the Metal Gear haters.
But that was but that was Metal Gear Net, and
Right.
they were around for quite a long time. And I guess, later on he just kind of found new interests, and the site kind of slowed down, and then MetalGearSolid.org came along and sort of picked up the torch and carried it. But that was where it all started, and that's always kind of going to be the one that I have the fondest memories of, because that's where everything got started, where I started meeting people and kind of getting to know how the whole thing worked. On a kind of similar note, another thing that happened was about a month or so before Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, someone got a leaked copy and
my God.
posted a synopsis of the entire story on the forum.
Oh no.
That sounds like Kojima's worst nightmare and the fans.
The thing was, it didn't take. Because imagine you're coming off the heels of the first Metal Gear Solid and you read Metal Gear Solid 2's story summed up on a page. Are you going to believe that that's what the story is?
Oh, no, because it sounds like a fucking fever dream.
Exactly. And everyone was like, "What is this? What is this fanfic crap?" And then the game comes out and we're like, "Oh my God, that was real."
I didn't realize that there was like a Snape kills Dumbledore moment.
Oh
in
yeah,
Metal Gear history.
Almost for every Metal Gear, actually, there has been something like that.
Who's the leaker? I want to know who the leaker is on Konami's side.
Well, it's been different every time. With MGS 3, this one was famous in our circles for a while. Konami used a very specific casting agency for their voice acting, and one of the members of the MetalGearSolid.org community was an amateur voice actor, and he saw MGS3 had a casting call on the site that he used. Now, on that site, you have to pay like $1.50 or $2 per role that you apply for. Mm-hmm. And this guy, being a diehard Metal Gear fan, was like, "You know what? I'm just going to drop $25 or so and get every single bio." And it gave him full biographies and script excerpts from the game. And we knew a significant amount of the plot because he took them and posted them on the forum.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
It was bad enough that we actually got a cease and desist from Konami.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And we the community manager at the time, whose name I won't mention, but I'm sure Jeremy might have mentioned him. I'm not sure. I can't remember if he mentioned him.
Yeah, I can't recall either.
But he threatened to sue us if we didn't take it down.
Holy shit.
Oh my God.
That's crazy. You guys are like the rock and roll, like guerrilla terrorists of the early Metal Gear.
That, yeah. With MGS4, it wasn't quite as dramatic, but during the Metal Gear Solid 4 boot camp, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Oh, yeah. Ryan talked to us about it as well.
Yeah, somebody took a photo of the boot camp room, and on a monitor skewed to the side, you could see Big Boss's face front and center.
Oh my God.
So we were like, "Oh, he's alive." Yeah.
Like from the epilogue, like for real?
Yeah, it was the end. Like somebody took a photo of the ending and it was like right there. So you can find that photo pretty easily.
Yeah, I feel like now that you mention it, I think the boot camp picture that I did see back in the day was on the unofficial site. So I think that tracks. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think Peace Walker and 5 were kind of immune to that for the most part, but
Right. I want to ask you, just because we asked Chris Zimmerman Salter and she did not give us a straight answer, so I want to know, as sort of in my opinion, one of the most analytical members of the Metal Gear fan community, even in 2019, I want to hear your hot take on who the hell you think voices Eva.
Oh my God,
Suzette Mignette.
Yeah.
She would not. She would not.
She almost did. Thing. I feel like she was right. It was right there on the tip of her tongue, and then she's like, "No, I'm not going to tell you."
I haven't really looked into it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It was one of those things where I'm curious, but if someone goes to those kind of lengths to not be known, I'm not gonna go looking for him.
Yeah.
Well, and Chris was saying that it was definitely out of like respect for the actor, so I kind of say it in like a semi like jest, but
I know Hader made a joke about knowing who it was one time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know, unfortunately. I'd like to
Nice.
know, but it's if she doesn't want to know, if she doesn't want people to know who she is, then yeah, I'm not going to go looking.
right on,
Yeah.
right on. Do you have any other like crazy fandom stories? I guess less like waging war on Konami and more. I don't know. Like, do you have any favorite moments? Like when you think back on it, is there like a certain event or a certain time that you were a part of the site that you think back fondly on?
That's a good question. As terrible as this sounds, most of the memories that stand out are when things were going wrong. So when things were going well, you didn't really think about it too much. So most of what I remember is when everything was going to hell. But I guess the E3 trip was probably my favorite thing, and I hate to use that example because it's one I'm front and center in. But we basically said to the community, look, we want to go to E3. We want to meet up with Peyton and maybe get some time with Kojima and cover MGS4, but we need help. And the entire community pitched in and basically got me out there to E3.
Oh, wow.
Which was incredible.
Wow.
And so what we did was we did a contest after the fact to everybody who pitched in, got their name in a drawing. And while I was there, I got a copy of Police Not signed.
Ooh.
And that was what we gave out in the contest.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So that was probably my favorite part. Is it was probably the time when like everybody was on the same page. Either that or when we were working on a machinima, which got one episode out and that was about it.
What was
Are those sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, what was the game? Was it the game Metal Gear that you used, or was it
for the machinima?
Yeah.
Yeah, when Metal Gear Online came out, that was around the time that Red versus Blue was starting, and we were all like, "Oh man, those guys are amazing. We need to do what they're doing." And so we tried to kind of ride on their coattails a bit, and it was really, really hard. And there's an episode of it on YouTube. We called it the Fox Chronicles, and it's not great, but if you want to see it, you can probably find it pretty easy.
Oh, you better believe I'm including it in the show notes for this episode.
But that was a lot of fun to set up, and we had a ton of people helping out and trying to choreograph all of the action and the acting and do voice work, and it was a long episode. I think the episode's like 10 minutes long that we ended up making, but then we never continued it because we just couldn't get everybody synced up, and I kind of dropped the ball and we had other things going on. But at the time, that was a huge amount of fun.
Yeah, because a lot of people, like around the time Red versus Blue came out, started doing like machinima because it was just the thing to do at the time, which is wild. There was a lot of shows out there.
Oh yeah, everyone saw what they were doing and were like, okay, yeah, that's the way to go. And we kind of tried to deviate a little bit from it, to try and go more into like telling a Metal Gear is really a different flavor from Halo, but in hindsight, yeah, it just kind of came off like we were copying them.
Oh no.
It is what it is,
I wanted to just really quickly throw this out there. I think at the time the pool of players that were playing Metal Gear Online with the subsistence release was like so small that I wonder if we came across one another on the battlefield, Ryan.
It possibly. I think the only time there have ever been a huge amount of players on MGO was during the early days of MGO 2 when they had that beta, and then shortly after the game came out. But yeah, the barrier to entry for that first version was really high, and it's a shame because
I loved it.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah, it's like the way I like to think of the three versions of MGO that have been out is kind of like the first version is like a playground where you've got a slide and some swing sets and enough to kind of entertain yourself with, but it's nothing too serious. The second version is more like a rickety old amusement park with a lot of fun things to do, but it's also kind of broken. And then the third one's kind of like a skate park where you're going to be doing one thing and eventually you're going to be done with it.
Right. I think that's a good way to put it. Well, so Sam and I were racing each other by rolling across the map, and I think that's the best way to do it.
We got trapped in it was a match that was like first to 100 with a group that was way better than us. It was like a best for like, what was it, like 30 minutes?
Yeah, it was just like a 30-minute match, and I think we got stomped within the first 5, and then I was like, Sam, look at what I can do.
Oh, some of the players on there are ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was super fun when I think we had a listener from the podcast playing with Sam and I, and we ended up in this server where it was almost asynchronous. It was like almost this weird like what the hell was that Left 4 Dead silly follow up that they tried to do with all the players versus the one monster. Anyway,
Evolve.
Yeah. So it was like all of us versus one player playing as Quiet, and it was absolutely amazing. Because she would just like
sounds like a bit of fun.
It was pretty fun.
Yeah, she would predator mode, and then one of us would just disappear off the map, and we'd all be like, "Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!" But
yeah, I'm talking about MGO. That's a rabbit hole of a topic.
Yeah, it's like describing a dream.
For a while. Yeah, and I have some choice thoughts about MGO3 specifically. Like two is my favorite. I love the variety in that game, and just despite how fundamentally broken a lot of it is, the fact that it's fundamentally broken is kind of what makes it enjoyable in the first place. Mm-hmm. And no two matches are going to be the same. Have you guys played the Metal Gear Online 2 revival at all?
No, we've been meaning to. I think MGO2 might be the one that I have the least amount of experience with, to be totally honest.
It's ridiculous how much detail is in that game. Everything has like I'm trying to think of a way to put it. Every individual part of that game has some collection of quirky elements to it. So look at one character. If you play as Liquid Ocelot, you have 3 things right off the bat that are really interesting about him are, 1, you have Guns of the Patriots as an actual move. So he points his fingers at someone and goes bang and locks their SOP for a couple seconds so they can't fire their gun.
Beautiful.
So
I love it.
you can, once he's done that enough, he can do a full-fledged Guns of the Patriots, which he stands still, puts it to his head, fires, and within a range, he puts everyone into that kind of zone out mode where they're like, acting like zombies and they can't do anything. And he yells out like, "Behold!" and it's hilarious. But the most amazing thing about him is that if he gets killed, right at the end, I can't remember the exact criteria for this, but there's a specific criteria for it, but if you get killed as Liquid Ocelot right at the end of a match, when the time expires, he'll get back up and add a minute to the clock and go, "Sorry, that won't work this time."
What?
Oh my god.
What?
Yes, please. I want a whole game of that. That sounds
great.
amazing.
And it'll exit out to like the stat screen and everything, and then it'll go away and he'll get back up, and there's like a little cutscene for it and everything. And like the game is full of little quirks like that.
Holy shit. So you can tell they put like as much effort into that as they would say like the main game as opposed to MGO3, which feels kind of tacked on.
It's such a shame that the netcode is so terrible, because you'll throw a grenade and somebody will go flying and they'll be over on one end of the room for you, and in actuality they're on the other end, so people are popping around and it's a mess, but it's also a blast.
It's a lot of personality. I love a game with personality. Yeah. Metal Gear is the perfect series to have stuff like that, and I think MGO3 is fine, but it just doesn't have that same like oomph to it. Like,
yeah, and I don't think it's the system necessarily, because the gameplay is rock solid. Yeah. It's just there's so little to do with it.
Yeah. I think we collectively, like me, Sam, and some of our patrons, all hopped on, and I think over the course of like maybe 3 or 4 evenings of playing like 4 to 6 hours, I felt like I'd seen everything.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's so much variety in MGO2 that no two matches are ever going to be the same. I mean, the number of of special characters. The fact that if you're in a sneaking match, one of you can play as the Mark II sometimes and just go around shocking people and stealing their dog tags. It's hilarious.
That's awesome. So speaking of MGO and the woes of MGO 3, I've been dying to ask you this question because I feel like, I don't know, it's almost like for people who are like really into network television, it's like, what'd you think of the ending of Lost? Is kind of like this sort of legacy question they ask people. I'm curious, how do you feel about, and I've got this sort of in air quotes in our notes, how do you feel about how Metal Gear ended?
Well, let me kind of preface this first by saying I think it should have ended a long time ago. It's kind of been Walking Dead for me.
Totally fair.
Which
I mean that in a couple of
funnily
senses.
enough, just
both.
ended. Actually,
so I mean that in two ways. Yeah. I subscribe to the idea that Metal Gear should have ended with MGS 2.
Yay! I love Ryan.
And everything after that was just kind of tacked on and forced, and to varying degrees of success. So MGS 3 kind of, it gave you a little bit extra and closed things out without stepping on the toes of MGS 2.
Mm-hmm.
MGS 2 is very ambiguous. It ends on a mysterious note. It doesn't kill the mystery. It leaves you with more. It's meant to be open-ended, and that's kind of the message it leaves you with at the end.
MGS4 kind of said, fuck y'all, and kicked the door down.
Yeah, exactly. MGS4 comes in and says, hey, that's a nice looking MGS2 you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And yeah, I've my friends will probably give me crap for this later, but I tend to rant about MGS4 more than I probably should. Hell, my wife will give me crap for this later.
That's amazing. Have you seen that? Have you seen the 3-hour MGS4 like breakdown video that
oh god, which one?
That Steak Bentley put up on YouTube? I think
yeah, I laughed my ass off at that.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
I can't say I completely agree with him on every note, but for the most part, that was really cathartic to watch. Have you ever seen the MGS4 in a nutshell video?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the other one. The best takedown of MGS4 I've seen was by Tim Rogers.
Good old Tim.
And he kind of very famously was the one that started the more serious critical talk about Metal Gear Solid 2. Mm-hmm. I know he kind of disavows this nowadays, but
yeah, you're talking about the dreaming in an empty room, right?
Dreaming in an empty room, and that kind of spearheaded the whole taking MGS2 seriously in a different context, trend of thinking. When he got around to Metal Gear Solid 4, it was one of the funniest things I'd seen at the time. It was he had a website called actionbutton.net where he and several other writers would do reviews of games. And I guess now he's kind of spun that into his game company name now, but
yeah, I think he also I think he's primarily just on Kotaku now.
Right.
Yeah.
So he I'm trying to remember exactly what it is, and I'm sorry if I get the details wrong, but he did this thing on the site where it was like the top 30 video games of all time, and it counted down through like what he and the other writers thought were like the best 30 games ever. And each one was like a full review / breakdown in the style of, it wasn't just a review. It was like a critical analysis. And it was, it's got the humorous element to it. It's very new games journalism, which I don't know. Are we still using that term these days?
I guess it's kind of like calling the current generation of consoles next gen. After a certain point, it just starts being.
So I mean, but they all had that kind of flavor to them, and it would count down, and then they got to like number 2, which was Super Mario Brothers 3, and then they got to number 1, and it was and you had to go to the page, and it said, "Click here because the number 1 video game of all time is," and you click it, absolutely not Metal Gear Solid 4.
That sounds like some
and it was a giant takedown.
That's amazing.
And my favorite part of that article was when he put it like this, and I love this. It was he said Metal Gear Solid 4 is Hideo Kojima's Springtime for Hitler.
Whoa! Oh my god!
Shit.
And I have never heard a more spot on description of that game.
Yeah, that's insane. I have a super quick. This is gonna be like semi deep cut, kind of weird alternative internet question from like the early 2000s. You guys know that blog Maddox, right? Maddox Rule,
Yeah.
Mhm.
whatever the hell. It's 2019. I haven't gone back to that. Is that guy a piece of shit, or was it actually legitimately funny? I can't remember.
I think it was a idiosyncratic.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a piece of its time. I actually met him once,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
he was pretty cool.
Oh, okay, right on.
It's kind of funny. His favorite video game of all time is Snatcher.
Ooh,
Interesting.
perfect. Now we have an excuse to talk to Maddox.
I mean, internet personalities are always, I think generally you're always going to see like the front facing side and then the real person behind it to a degree.
For sure, for sure. I can just
Um,
I just know with like all of the flack that it seems like I don't know. It's like it's almost anti Kojima. So one of our listeners, and I really can't remember who the hell it was. I'll look it up here shortly so that we can actually name check them. But they pointed out something really really cool earlier today that blew my fucking mind, which is the longer somebody exists in the Metal Gear timeline, the more likely you are to hear their sympathetic background story. And so in anything Kojima writes for Metal Gear, no one's actually a villain. Like they're all good people at the end of the day.
I mean, there's a difference between being sympathetic and being a good person.
Right, fair
you know?
enough, fair enough. They're all yeah. But I feel like
And
it's almost that's the inverse of internet personalities. Like with internet personalities, it's like the longer they exist, the more you're like, oh fuck, this guy's not great.
it kind of goes into how like I can't stand the big boss worship that you see a lot of the time now.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And like this guy's a despot. He's
Very recently, that's
Yeah.
blown up a lot.
Yeah.
and and MGS5 tries to kind of put a big giant neon sign in front of the player saying you're worshiping a bad guy. But it still didn't seem to stick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is a guy who trains child soldiers, held the world for ransom. Yeah, I mean,
Killed a bunch of people in his own base.
yeah, I don't really know if there is such a thing as a good guy in the Metal Gear franchise. Maybe
That's
Sonny,
yeah,
but even
yeah,
she's
definitely
not
Sonny.
completely
Yeah.
clean.
Like a lot of times you'll say, like, I think Otacon may be the closest adult, but still, he's done some shit too.
And, yeah, I mean, even he's like, he's hacking into the Pentagon.
The listener was Kenneth Yu, by the way.
It was there's a music video for Metal Gear Solid 5 in Japan that actually kind of makes fun of this point.
Oh,
Not makes
really?
fun of it, but kind of pushes it. There's a band that Kojima liked called White Ash, and they did a song called "The Phantom Pain."
Mm.
And I think they've broken up since, but he brought them in and had them do a music video for MGS5, and it's very ironic because the whole thing is about this kid who plays MGS5 and sees what Snake does and is like, I'm going to go out and be a good guy too. And so he tries to help in the world, but it's all very kind of ironic.
I don't know if White Ash is a reference to the Pillows or if the Pillow song White Ash is a reference to the band. So now
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Might
my J-Rock wheels are turning in my brain now.
it might be actually. I didn't even think of that.
That's crazy.
But they're pretty good.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely. I'm for the first time in the history of Metal Gear Mondays, and I think people at home will love this tidbit. I'm actually keeping notes as you list things, so that the show notes are accurate.
Wow, that's surprising.
That's a foreign concept.
That's surprising me even.
Ryan, I wanted to ask you. How did, as best as you can, and I definitely don't want to put any spotlights on any sore spots. As best as you can, I mean, where did everything with the unofficial site sort of end up going? Like, what are you up to now? What was sort of we talked about how Metal Gear ended, but like, what happened with the unofficial site for people who may not be familiar?
I mean, there's definitely some sour grapes there between some of the old members, and I don't want to
right
I don't want to call out anybody. We were all younger. We all did stupid things. But I think the best way of putting it is that when you've got three people pulling in different directions, eventually something's going to break. And it got to a point where the domain owner, So it was even though we all built and managed the site together, the domain name itself, metalgearsolid.org, was owned by one person. And eventually they just sort of decided, to hell with this, it's not worth the trouble. And they sold it. And that was that.
That's crazy. There was no
it was pretty quick
discussion or anything. It just one day the lights were out kind of deal.
Yes, exactly.
Well,
so later on, I tried to kind of reunite everybody, and I made a site temporarily, the Kojima Productions network, and I tried to kind of do the same thing, but broaden it and make it not just about Metal Gear, but about everything. And that worked for a little bit, but then I'd recently become a father, and life kind of took over, and I didn't have time to do that anymore. So now that my kids are older and I've got more time, I'm kind of getting back into that, and I'm trying to revisit some of those ideas and see where they go.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think you doing that and putting in that legwork and stuff. I mean, I can't recall when I discovered you on Twitter, but like, I mean, honestly, like, and we've plugged it 100 million times, but like, please follow at Nitroid on Twitter, because holy shit, like, I feel like even like your little tidbit about the Tiger handheld and all that other stuff, I was like, oh my god, like, where are you getting
that thing?
this?
Is the bane of my existence, man. It will stay pinned until I either find it or lose all hope.
Like a bounty.
I'm honestly considering offering a reward for the footage at this point. Yeah. And the story there is pretty simple. I don't know how much you guys know about it, but at the time, Tiger was coming out with their own handheld game system, kind of a Game Gear-esque sort of thing. Had a touchscreen on it. It was all in black and white, but it had a touchscreen. And their big thing was that, hey, this thing has a phone jack in it, so you can connect to the internet and browse it on a handheld game. And it was the jankiest thing imaginable. Like, they were trying to reconcile a PDA and a game system and an internet browser and all these things together. I mean, it was, you kind of had to admire the ambition, but it was terrible. And I at the time was a stupid kid and got one. And I have no idea where it is now, probably in a yard, sold in a yard sale or something. But the main reason I got it was that I'd heard that they were making a port of Metal Gear Solid for it. And I was like, oh man, I could take it with me everywhere. I love that. And eventually it was just canceled. But before it was canceled, there was actual, I don't know if it was gameplay footage or pre-rendered, pre-prepared stuff or what, but there was footage of what they said was the game that was released to the public on Usenet and AOL at the time. So this is, dating myself a bit. And it got shared around a bit and then vanished. So this is 20 years ago now that this has been gone.
Oh my god!
And
there's no emulation or anything anywhere.
Well, the thing is, there's no, even if you could emulate the Gamecom, which is what it was called. It's called the Game.com or just Gamecom. Even if you could emulate it, there's no game to emulate. The MGS was never released; it was canceled.
Oh, I see.
So
I see.
the only thing, right? The only thing that exists of this right now are photos and information from news reports. But somewhere out there is footage of this thing. So either sitting in Konami's archives or on a hard drive at Hasbro or something. And someday I hope to find this thing. And occasionally I'll see someone online talk about it and be like, oh yeah, I saw that back in the day. And I'll be like, do you still have it? Please tell me you still have it. But so far, no luck. So one of these days when I've got some disposable income on hand, I'm probably going to, like you said, offer a bounty for it and see if that shake things out.
That's crazy. It's a real Nintendo PlayStation situation.
Exactly, and that's my holy grail. If I can find that, I'll be happy.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't remember what they were touring it around or something, and I think I was at MagFest for 2016. I actually met what is his name? Super Bunny Hop George himself. Can I remember his name?
Oh yeah, George Weedman, right?
Yeah. So
my famous name, right?
No, I think that's right. I met him there, and I remember they were touring the Nintendo PlayStation around, and I got to hear somebody tell the story about it, and they straight up said, I guess some executive somewhere had it sitting on their desk forever, and they liquidated the office building, and I guess they sold all of it in an auction, and somehow it ended up in the stacks.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's how these guys ended up with it, and we're like touring it around and stuff. So who knows?
I kind of wonder about that with some of the Metal Gear stuff. Like the one thing I'm curious to know if it's still hanging around is when they were developing MGS1, Yoji Shinkawa, as he was designing Metal Gear Rex, he bought a bunch of model kits and stuck pieces together and essentially made himself a Metal Gear Rex model out of like battleship and motorcycle kits, and just basically just haphazardly made something out of loose parts, and it looks incredible. And I know for the longest time he had that, I think, on his desk, but now that they're gone, I'm kind of wondering where that is. If he took it with him, or if it's sitting, like you said, on some executive's office somewhere, or in a closet. Who knows?
Yeah, so now we're all waiting for Konami to die and turn into a piñata for Metal Gear
I have no
stuff.
idea.
Jesus.
Maybe we should divert all these people that are trying to storm Area 51 to storm Konami for this stuff.
Well, what's interesting is that it does seem like there's a bit of a power vacuum there now, and this is just me speculating, and this is not me saying I know anything, but it seems like they don't really know what to do with the franchise right now. Previously, you had. Well, let me explain what I mean by that, because I don't mean it in the sense you think I might mean it.
Bomberman.
So previously you kind of had Kojima as the gatekeeper of these franchises. If somebody wanted to do something, they would have to go through him, and he'll be like no or yes or let's rework it or whatever. And for the longest time, allegedly he was the main reason. Allegedly he was the reason why Police Knots never got localized. I know there are stories about we couldn't fit the lip syncing, but through other circles, people have said that, well, really, he just didn't want to bring it over for some reason or another. But my point here is that, if someone wanted to say, hey, what if we made like Lego Metal Gear? He would kind of be like, no, that's not, that doesn't kind of correspond to my vision of what Metal Gear is aesthetically.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the end of it. But now there's really nobody gatekeeping it. So you've got all these weird things coming out, like the Metal Gear Solid board game and the vinyl release that looks
Mondo.
like the cover art was drawn by a toddler.
Oh no!
Seriously, every time I look at that graphic, it's like the 3 Wolf Moon T-shirt. It's terrible.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Are you talking about the Cyborg Ninja one from San Diego?
I mean, that's better, but I'm talking like the insert.
Oh,
and
okay.
That thing just makes that design like. I'm a freelance graphic artist, so that design kind of makes me like viscerally angry.
It's weird coming from Mondo as well, considering that like everything they put, well, I'm not going to say everything, it's a little much, but like most of what they put out is gorgeous. So I'm a little baffled.
I might fight you on that one.
Oh, damn. All right. I'll walk it back.
A friend of mine made a good comparison once that I kind of agree with, which he called them the Funko Pop of record labels.
Oh, wow. We'll tell Isaac, our other co-host, who hoards Mondo releases, what you said.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm not trying to start a fight. But just putting that aside, just looking at the MGS release, it's really shocking to see in comparison to the Snatcher and Police Knots releases, which otherwise were excellent.
Yeah. I've got a copy of the Snatcher soundtrack on vinyl downstairs, and it's beautiful. I love it.
The thing I was driving at, though, is that without a gatekeeper now, you're getting all of these strange projects. It's really kind of incredible that for the first, I know a lot of people might not want to hear this, but now that Kojima isn't working at Konami anymore, things are starting to come out that probably wouldn't have otherwise. So now we have Snatcher CD Romantic coming out on the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, completely. Mostly completely untouched, untranslated, but untouched. We've got the first piece of official localized Police Knots anything to ever come to the US. I mean, it's a vinyl album. It's not the game, but before that, that's literally the first piece of Police Knots merchandise that has ever come to the US.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
Yeah, that is it. It's the first and only. So we're in kind of a weird place, and I'm not saying it's good or bad necessarily. I mean, the situation with Kojima was a tragic mess, but it's interesting that now that there's really nobody, there's no auteur kind of pointing fingers and calling the shots behind the scenes. It seems like everything's fair game. So who knows what's going to happen 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think the cautious optimistic in me kind of hopes that, like, and for better or for worse, I think genuinely, I think the guy meant well, but like, I'm waiting for sort of like our Tom Hewlett to show up and like kind of do to Metal Gear what happened to Silent Hill in a way, but like at least it would be some activity. And I think that might be better than it just kind of sitting stagnant. Or, I mean, like you said at the beginning of this episode, like maybe we should all move on.
It's one of those things, and I kind of maybe I stand alone with this. So I realize that this is my opinion, and not everyone's going to share this, but canon in Metal Gear is one of those things that if you, I feel like if canon is what you're concerned about in Metal Gear, then you've kind of missed the boat.
Right.
I mean, this is a series that contradicts itself as a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, it doesn't give a shit about its canon, so why should you?
So when they come out with all of these spin-offs and you get things like Ghost Babel and Rising and Acid and even Survive to an extent, that's more interesting to me than, say, Kojima presents Metal Gear Solid 6. You know, because like, we've been there. We're just gonna see another attempt at kind of reconciling things that don't really need reconciled. But if we start giving it to other directors to kind of experiment with it, I think you're going to get more interesting stuff out of it. A lot of Metal Gear fans kind of scoff at games like Acid and Rising because, you know, they're not a Hideo Kojima game and they're deviating from the stealth formula. But I kind of think those are now the more interesting ones to look at because they took what was established and turn them on their head. Like, what can we do with this formula to go in a completely different direction? I want to see more stuff like that. If this is going to continue, that's what I want to see. Like, drop the canon, just do whatever.
Yeah, like use the archetypes. I think. Yeah. I think I want to go on record as saying that, like, I am baffled every single time people are like, "Yeah, I haven't played Rising, just because meh." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like our episode that we did where we covered Rising, I think we were very, very, very happy with that game, and like,
yeah, it's so out of left field and different and kind of exciting, and if that's not your style of game that you appreciate, then maybe, but I can't imagine anybody like not at least appreciating what it is.
I have a friend who is a big fan of Raiden and will probably give me a lot of shit after I say this because he like deeply hates Metal Gear Rising. Like deeply hates it. Like as much as I dislike Metal Gear Solid 4, that kind of level.
Weird. Is it because it's so goofy?
Because it kind of turns Raiden into a sociopath.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
Okay. That's the main element to it. But when I played Rising, it was like, oh, this is the grindhouse version of Metal Gear. This is what happens when Metal Gear is an exploitation film.
Right. I want to see the Solid Snake version of Metal Gear Rising. Like, show me I just want to see like the grindhouse version of every character.
It's funny you should say that because there was DLC in Japan that we didn't get that brought Solid Snake in.
Oh wow! I literally never knew that. That's insane.
And here's what's funny about it. Okay. I should explain that. By Metal Gear Rising, spoiler if anybody listening hasn't played it. If you accept the timeline of Rising, which that's a whole nother topic, but
yeah,
if you accept it, then Solid Snake is dead by the time Rising comes out. Mm-hmm. He is deceased, and his soul is now inside of a sword.
Oh no!
And you can get that sword as a weapon in the Japanese version of Rising, and every time you attack an enemy with it, Solid Snake's voice will give you advice.
Oh my god!
I love the idea of it being just like random advice, like very much so. Like, why are you raking the leaves off your driveway? Just hose it off, dummy. Like Dr. Steve Brule advice.
But like it's a sword with his name engraved in it. I think it's like a wooden sword or something. It's really kind of strange. But yeah, we never got that.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I want to see. I would love to see almost a world in which Metal Gear turned into almost like a gold, or I almost said GoldenEye, a 007 of sorts.
Yeah, I
Mm.
agree
It's like a
entirely. Like
it's like
treat
a
it like
big
007 or like Final Fantasy, where each one is a standalone
like a
tape.
big series of like Metal Gear Solid Gaidens type of games.
Yeah,
If
Yeah.
you could,
go ahead.
like take Metal Gear and any game director that you wish grabs a hold of it and makes a game, who do you think you would want to see?
Does it have to be somebody who hasn't already?
No, it can be whoever you want.
Because the safe answer here is Shinta Nojiri, who directed Ghost Babel and the Acid titles.
Okay.
But if it was somebody else, and I've been I've actually been thinking about this lately, trying to wonder who like might be an interesting person to take it up. And for a while I was thinking maybe Yoko Taro
Ooh,
would
holy
do
shit!
something interesting.
I didn't
but-
know. I didn't know that I wanted that until the words came out of your mouth, and now I'm like crying that it doesn't.
But here's the thing: the more I think about it, the more I'm like, instead of Metal Gear, maybe he would be better suited to Zone of the Enders.
Yeah,
Ooh,
I think that'd be great too.
I could get down with the Yoko Taro Zone of the Enders.
I don't know. That's a good question.
What about Hidetaka Miyazaki from Software?
Oh Lord.
No one speaks except for creepy laughs and all the stories in the item descriptions.
I am not very knowledgeable about his games, to be honest with you. Despite owning all of them, I have not beaten a single one.
Oh wow! I feel like based
yeah.
on the way that you analyze Metal Gear, I was actually going to take you for like a Souls player, but
you would think, and it's funny, but my wife is way better at those than I.
Nice.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just lack of time or lack of patience, or maybe I just suck at them. I don't know, but I don't even know what that would look like. Those are so far detached from one another that I'm not even sure.
They're very gameplay heavy, which I've never really considered Metal Gear as being like a gameplay game.
They're very intentional. Very, very intentional. It's probably the only other director who is as intentional as Kojima when it comes to certain things. I would almost even say more so.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about like a Suda 51 Metal Gear?
I like Suda 51 a lot. I really do. It's just I haven't really been interested in anything he's done after the first No More Heroes.
I think I'd agree with that.
It's like Shadows of the Damned was it didn't really grab me, and I don't know. We'll see how No More Heroes 3 kind of plays out.
Yeah, I feel like Shadows of the Damned is almost like our trying to think of like a film equivalent, but it feels like the most studio meddled game I'd ever heard of, because it's like you had Akira Yamaoka, you had Shinji Mikami, you had
the perfect formula,
right? And then I guess EA, based on what I've heard, I guess like there were so many different pitches for what the game was supposed to be, and then EA mandated that it be some like formulaic third-person shooter.
Yeah, that is a game that feels like there was something there originally that was really special, and it just got completely buried.
Right. So I still stand by Suda 51's the only, if you had to pick only one game to ever play by that guy, like Killer 7, 100%.
Oh yeah, yeah, easily Killer 7.
Yeah, wonderful game. I'm happy you were on, Ryan, because I feel like I don't know why, and I don't know if this is just like a weird habit of the internet or whatever. I have somewhat been intimidated by the fact that we cover shit that you like this entire time. and now that like we're talking, I'm like, no, this is great. We're simpatico. We're great. This is fine. So yeah. So I don't know. Thank you for being a human being.
Yeah, it's no problem. I hate call out culture. I'm not gonna participate in that, so don't worry about it.
That's awesome.
I might be the nerd who like pushes up his glasses and is like, actually, but beyond that, I'm not gonna come after you.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I wanted to ask. So one of the big reasons why I actually reached out to you because I thought, like, let's strike while the iron is hot. I wanted to get you on the show to plug something that you're putting together, which it's funny. We actually had a couple listeners like send us screenshots of your tweet where they were like, Sam, Alessio, like you should reach out. And I was like, well, no, like we're already doing a Metal Gear podcast. Why would we reach out? But it seems like you're doing a podcast project and that you're looking for people. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I don't want to just I want to do something a little different, and it's probably not going to have as wide of an appeal.
You can dunk on our podcast, Ryan. Feel free.
That's not what I
Call out culture. Call out culture.
This might be the kind of thing that bores everybody to tears, but there's a lot of behind the scenes information about Metal Gear that about Metal Gear, about Kojima, about Konami, Snatcher, Police Nuts, et cetera, and so on, that used to be readily available through a lot of these online communities, but nowadays has kind of been lost to time. And you can kind of dig it out through the internet archives, and there's, people who occasionally will throw out little tidbits, but there's a lot of stuff out there that's just being lost, day by day as the web kind of deteriorates over time. These sites vanish and not everything is properly backed up. And I have way too much useless information in my head and nowhere to put it. And what I'd like to do is a show where we just kind of talk about those esoteric things, the behind the scenes, like, give you an example. The fact that, say, when Metal Gear Solid 2 was being developed, Kojima went to his team and handed out notebooks to every single person and said, okay, every single day I want you to write down a new idea for something that you think would be interesting in the game. And then at the end of the week, we'll sit in a round table and throw out things and see what sticks.
That's awesome.
And a lot of people don't know that. And I think, I'm trying to remember like what came out of that. I think the bomb disposal idea came out of that. The spray can.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to have a friend later who's probably going to give me crap if I'm getting that
wrong.
wrong.
Trust me, we'll get more. We'll get more emails than you will about.
But things like that, I want to just have a show dedicated to like talking about, hey, wasn't it cool about, like, oh, what about when they were figuring this out? How did they think about it? And just talking about the obscure stuff and not so much the plot, because there aren't a lot of resources to find that anymore. And now that game companies have very well-defined social media presences. Presences?
Prezi.
Prezi. Yeah, we'll go with Prezi. But now that is more of kind of the established norm, they're not as open with their processes as they used to be.
Which is
they're
weird.
Not as open.
It's very catch-22. It's like you'd think with the social media platforms they'd be more open, but instead it's the other way around.
Excuse me. But yeah, I mean, there's nowhere to really get that kind of information if you're interested in it. And like, I really doubt you would ever see anything like the document of Metal Gear Solid 2 again.
Oh, if only.
That was a different time. Like there's an anecdote where Kojima was talking about how he went to a major game retailer to watch the launch of the document of MGS 2. And when he went there, he noted that all of the people who were in line to pick it up were game developers.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Basically looking for cues on how to design games. Yeah. So like things like that are what draw me in and are interesting to me. And so the show, I want to do stuff like that. So I'm trying to find people who kind of have an interest or a familiarity with that. And I've had a lot of people reach out, like more than I expected. So I'm still kind of sorting through the names, trying to get a hold of everybody. But yeah, that's kind of what I want to do. And it's not going to be like a super regular thing, probably just kind of like maybe twice a month where we get on and we say, oh yeah, this is happening. Let's talk about that for a couple minutes, and then kind of deviate into, yeah, well, when they were making this was going on,
right?
Stuff like that. So
that's awesome. Well, I mean, I know that hopefully Sam agrees with me, and I'm sure Isaac does. We would love to, at any point ever in the future, if you ever want to cross-pollinate or guest or vice versa, like we would, and not to put any pressure, but we would love to do that. Because
absolutely.
I think, and we've shared this with a lot of our guests lately, but I think as we're trucking through all of these interviews that have suddenly cropped up in a big, big way, like I feel like the mission of this podcast has gone from being like a games club podcast for new people to talk about Metal Gear and old people to reflect on Metal Gear, and has now just become like us documenting all of Metal Gear. And so the getting like the fan community side of things from you and other people that we've had on the show, and like talking to Jeremy and all the different folk, Chris Zimmerman and Salter and Terry and all these other people, and getting all these different perspectives, I think has been really, really invaluable. And so I think any way that we can cross-pollinate in the future, I think would be really, really cool.
Yeah. And I agree with that idea of archival. That's kind of the core behind what I want to do if I get this site that I'm building off the ground. Is the idea is and it's an archive. It's not a blog. It's not some sort of editorial thing. It's like we're going to grab everything that we can that's not available anymore, and put it somewhere so that it does not get lost.
That's awesome. How can our listeners help or tune in, or like, what kind of call to action can we give to folks listening to this right now?
The name of the site I'm building is what I used previously. It's the Kojima Productions network. It'll be koji.pro. And if you go to the Twitter account for that, which is, man, I should know this, it's mine, but I'm kind of liking. It's Koji Pro. It's at Koji Pro Network. The pinned tweet should be a link to our Discord channel. And in there, if there's anything you can think of that you think has historical value, that you think is worth being archived, or that you're worried is going to be taken down, and we don't mean like soundtracks or game ISOs or anything like that. We're not trying to break legal rules here, but which you'd be surprised how often I have to say that.
Oh, I bet.
You wouldn't think, but that comes up quite a bit. But anything that you think, oh, this is important, I think this should be preserved, drop by the Discord, get a hold of me, or post it there, and we'll take a look at it and see if we can back it up. Because the plan is to provide links to this stuff while it's still active elsewhere. But if it ever goes down, we can put it up ourselves so that it's not unavailable. So like one of the sort of bench test that we're doing right now is, as we're kind of getting the site to work, is this old article done by Autodesk, which they make. You ever heard of 3D Studio Max?
Yeah.
Or Maya?
Yeah.
Those are kind of the standard 3D rendering applications in the industry, apart from like Blender. But the software that they used to have, which has since been discontinued, was XSI Soft Image, and that was what Kojima Productions used for a very long time, all the way through Metal Gear Solid 4. And I can't remember if they used it into 5 or not. I don't think so, but again, I'm gonna have that friend of mine I mentioned before yell at me later.
Hey Ryan, is the friend just you?
It's my giant pack of notes.
Yeah, Ryan just like whips himself after the recording. He's like,
no, I've actually got a friend, and I don't want to put his name out there because if he doesn't want me to, but I've got a friend who is arguably far more knowledgeable than me in some areas. It's really he's a really smart guy when it comes to how they coded these games and developed them on a very technical level.
Oh wow. We'd like to talk to your friend at some point.
He's a young guy, and he's incredibly intelligent. It blows my mind every time I talk to him.
That's awesome.
But yeah, the article that we're kind of doing our test run with this site for is this article that Autodesk put out, where they did a case study for XSI Soft Image and how it was used to make the graphics for Metal Gear Solid 4. And it's this giant sprawling article where they go into like, these are the methods they used. This is what the renders looked like at certain stages. This is how we did costumes that could swap on top of the same character, and the rigging was matched. And there are images and videos and really intimate details about how they use this software to develop the game. But a lot of that is now fragmented and lost. And you can bring up some of it on the Internet Archive, on like the Wayback Machine. But a lot of it's also not available. Some of those images have been lost, and we've been going all around the web trying to find them anywhere we can and piecemealing this thing back together, bit by bit. And eventually, like, that'll be one of our launch articles is this whole giant sprawling article about the development of MGS4 and how the graphics were made.
That's awesome. That is absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, I can say with 100% certainty that is extremely unique content that I would urge everybody to check out.
it's the amount of work that went into these games is beyond anything I think most people imagine. They are true craftsmen. I mean, when the term artisan is thrown around far too much, but that's what these guys are.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, and I'm super excited too. I think in the future, and we're still trying to kind of lock this interview down, but we're talking to Sean Eystone, who,
Oh, nice.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
at trying to remember where he's at
I
now.
think he's in the UK, is what he told us. I think last I spoke with him, as far as like timing, we were trying to line up timelines.
Yeah, I thought. Oh man, I can't remember what company he was working for, but yeah, I got to meet him briefly a few years back, and he was also a really really awesome guy.
Nice. Yeah. Again, like massive shout out to Chris Zimmerman Salter for setting all these things up, because she even introduced us to Ryan Payton. So I just, yeah, 100% like so I'm actually podcasting from a very empty room. This is like the last podcast recording that will ever take place from my home in Missouri, because I'm moving to New York City in 3 days.
Oh wow, congratulations.
Thanks. But I owe Chris an edit of her interview like ASAP. So I'm gonna probably get on that later this evening. But yeah, I just mapped.
You got to do a good job. I mean, with a voice director, you're
I
gonna.
love
Yeah,
like
she's gonna
texted
be
she like
paying real
texted him
close
or messaged
attention.
him like almost immediately after. Is like, can we do a couple pickups for this? And I was like, I don't know that I've ever done a podcast pickup before, but I'm into it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, for sure. So I think it'll be great. And I will definitely be sure to report back, because I think for whatever reason, I guess me and Christopher Randolph might be getting coffee at some point. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, he was a very sweet guy. We talked to him on the show, and I'm very excited for that episode to come out as well. So I promise I'm not just like name dropping. These are actual things that are coming. So
I've rarely seen a fandom where the people involved in the making of the game have been um, so open with their fans and so enthusiastic about it.
I wish that we could find him. Maybe we can. This is something we can collaborate on or whatever. But like I would love, like, other than, I mean, it's all primarily been voice stuff. Talking to Jeremy was amazing, and if you guys, as of time of recording, if you guys have not read Jeremy's write up that he did for Polygon on translating Metal Gear, like, you're doing yourself a disservice. Metal Gear Solid. But I would love to be able to talk to some of the fucking like boots on the ground, like people who worked in Japan. Like, I think the English speaking US folks are pretty easy for us to, not relatively easy for us to speak with and connect with, but like I would love to just talk to anybody who sat in the damn room and coded these things, you know?
Yeah, you might be able to get some of the XKPLA staff who helped code Metal Gear Online, but
Right.
yeah, a lot of those guys, they're difficult to get a hold of because Konami, I believe, puts pretty strict restrictions on them with regards to what they can talk to, even after they've left the company.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. I wonder, I wish that I could be a fly on the wall somewhere to hear Konami's response to Jeremy's Polygon article. Because like he didn't say anything damning, but I'm sure that there was definitely some stuff in there that they weren't necessarily.
I don't want to. Well, I don't want to speak for anybody there. I can't obviously, but the impression I get is that the U.S. team, the U.S. side of things, is they're pretty laid back and pretty cool about this stuff. They're not really gonna ruffle any feathers unless you give them an excuse to. They're going to do their job. They're professionals, but they're also, very friendly with their fans for the most part. But the Japanese side of things, I think the impression I get is that when it comes to the U.S. side of things, they're mostly unaware. So they might not even know.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah,
that's a hunch on my part. So,
for sure. I feel so privileged because like as being like a film fan, it's like most countries where film is like obviously other than Asian countries where film is huge and like has like this sort of foundational presence. It's like I took French, I can speak Italian, I can speak English, and it's like super easy to talk to people about movies like wherever. But it's like with the sheer quantity of Japanese video games, it feels like there's a huge disconnect between folks like us that are maybe trying to do sort of interview style content about it and being able to like successfully pull off like consistent podcasts with translations, or you know what I mean?
It feels like a different dimension almost.
Yeah, it's wild.
And I've kind of wondered. I've shared this worry with a couple people, but sometimes I worry that like what we collectively know about Metal Gear on this side of the ocean is next to nothing. We're like we get like 10% of it. And there's like this other 90% over in Japan that because we don't know the language, we're missing out on. So there's all this information that we think we're like, oh, we know all this stuff about how the game was made and everything, and it's just this little drop in the bucket compared to them. That's what I'm like terrified of.
Yes, one day we can ascend and we will know everything.
One day.
If anything's ever going to inspire me to learn Japanese, it's going to be figuring out if there's Metal Gear info I don't know.
I love it. That's amazing. Yeah, and if anybody's listening to this and they're like, "Oh yeah, of course. Like I can translate that for you guys." Please let us know. That's contact@metalgearmondays.com.
And if you have any information on the tigergame.com version of Metal Gear Solid, stop holding it hostage and bring it to the public.
Yes, please. That you will make my entire 2 decades.
Not to be confused with Kim.com, game.com.
Game.com. Oh my god.
Lesser known brother.
Yeah, of course. That's the Mega Upload guy, right? Kim.com?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm showing my age of internet file sharing.
And I'm astonished that guy isn't in prison right now.
Oh, I'm blown away. Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan, thank you so much. We want to value your time, and I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on. It's nice to talk to somebody in the same time zone for the first time. But yeah,
what was that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun.
Well, it's the fact that every time we talk to anybody, they're either like Japanese time, Eastern time, or Pacific time. It's never Central time. So,
well, it's about to not matter for you in 3 days. So.
That's true. Yeah. When the divide between him and I becomes more intense. So, yay. But yeah, Ryan, where can people find you online?
At Nitroid on Twitter, and eventually at koji.pro.
Beautiful. And we want to reiterate so much because like I know when people skip around on podcasts or whatever, I just want to make sure we catch them somewhere. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully,
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hopefully this is the first of many, and hopefully you enjoyed yourself. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for all the work that you did a long time ago, and
I'm glad that people really did appreciate it. It means a lot to me after the fact. I really do look fondly, I look back fondly on those times and all the friends I made back then, and we kind of just it kind of feels at times like it faded into the ether. But the fact that every once in a while I'll get someone who's like, "Hey, I went to that site and I really enjoyed it," it means a lot to me.
Yeah, man. It's in a weird way having this conversation with you and just talking about all this stuff. It sort of feels, it's almost like, I can't remember what the original site was, but it's like, yeah, so, you can trace like metalgear.net to the unofficial site to us. And so it's like this weird, like, I don't know, like this would be as if the sausage was interviewing the pig, I feel like.
Gross. What?
So let's end on that extremely disturbing
I give
image.
That 10 out of 10 yikes.
Yep. Ryan, 100%. I'm just going to throw it to you. We always throw it to our guests. Our sign-off phrase is "It's just a box." I don't know if you have any fun way that you want to get to that phrase and deploy it, but you're more than welcome to use it if you'd like. This is almost like the after-dinner mint. If you want it, go for it. If not, let us know.
Just a box.